Last Tuesday, my son Jake came home from school with a trophy. Not just any trophy, a massive golden cup with his name engraved on a shiny plaque. Student of the Year, it read. He was beaming, practically bouncing on his toes as he set it on our kitchen counter. Look, Mom, look what I won. I should have been proud. I should have hugged him, taken pictures, called his dad at work. Instead, I stared at that trophy and felt something cold settle in my chest, because this wasn't the first time I'd seen an award like this in our family, and the last time it had been the beginning of everything falling apart. The phone started ringing that evening. Word travels fast in small towns like Portland, Maine, especially when it comes to the Morrison family. My mother called first, her voice bright with that familiar excitement I hadn't heard in years. "Sarah, I just heard about Jake's award. Oh, honey, this is wonderful. He's just like..." "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't say it." But she did anyway. "He's just like Brandon was at that age. So talented, so special." Brandon. My older brother. The golden boy who could do no wrong until he did everything wrong and took our family down with him. I hung up without saying goodbye. Jake found me later that evening, sitting in the living room with the lights off, just staring at that damn trophy gleaming on the counter under the kitchen light. "Mom? Are you okay?" I turned to look at my son, my beautiful, brilliant 12-year-old son who had his whole life ahead of him. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." "Don't you like my trophy?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course I liked it. I was proud of him. But that trophy, that recognition, that praise, it all felt like deja vu. Like watching a movie I'd seen before, knowing how badly it was going to end. "I love it, Jake. I love you. Never forget that, okay?" He nodded, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. Smart kid. He knew something was off. That night, after Jake was asleep, I called my sister Rebecca in Seattle. She was the only one in the family who might understand. "Sarah? It's late. Is everything okay?" "Jake won an award today." Student silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "Oh." Mom called. "She said he's just like Brandon." "Jesus, Sarah. I'm sorry. I can't do this again, Becca. I can't watch another golden boy turn into..." "Jake isn't Brandon," she interrupted. "He's your son. He's different." But was he? As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but remember Brandon at 12. The trophies, the awards, the constant praise from teachers and family. How special everyone said he was. How he was going to change the world. Brandon had been the star of our family from day one. Born when I was 5, he immediately became the center of everyone's universe. While I learned to fade into the background, Brandon learned to shine. Valedictorian, star athlete, homecoming king, full scholarship to Harvard. He was everything our small Maine town had ever produced, and everyone made sure he knew it. I was just Brandon's little sister. The quiet one. The one who got decent grades but never excellent ones. The one who played piano but never well enough for recitals. The one who drew in notebooks but never showed anyone the pictures. Don't get me wrong. Brandon wasn't cruel to me. He wasn't the stereotypical mean older brother. He was actually kind, protective even. But his light was so bright that it cast the rest of us into shadow. And somehow, I learned to prefer the shadows. They were safer there. When Brandon graduated high school, the whole town threw him a party. The mayor showed up. The local newspaper did a feature story. "Local boy makes good," the headline read, with a picture of Brandon in his cap and gown. That perfect smile that made everyone believe in possibilities. He went to Harvard, studied business and economics, called home every Sunday, sent postcards from Boston, came back for holidays with stories that made our dinner table feel like a stage where he was the star performer and we were the captivated audience. After college, he moved to New York City. Wall Street, he said. Finance, going to make his mark on the world. Our parents were so proud they could barely contain themselves. They framed his Harvard diploma and hung it in the living room. They kept newspaper clippings of his achievements in a scrapbook. They told anyone who would listen about their son, the success story, the one who made it out of Maine and into the big leagues. I went to community college, became a nurse, married Tom, a good man, a mechanic who fixed boats down at the marina. We had Jake when I was 28. A quiet, normal life. Nothing spectacular, nothing that made headlines or required scrapbooks, but it was mine, and I was content with it. Brandon would visit twice a year, Christmas and summer. Each time he seemed more polished, more confident, more successful. Designer clothes, expensive watch, stories about deals and clients and opportunities. He always brought gifts, lavish, thoughtful presents that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget, and he was generous. When Dad's fishing boat needed repairs, Brandon sent a check. When Mom wanted to remodel the kitchen, Brandon covered it. When I mentioned that Tom's garage was struggling during the recession, Brandon quietly helped with our mortgage payments for 6 months. He was the golden boy who kept giving back, the success story that proved dreams could come true. Everyone in town held him up as an example of what was possible if you just worked hard enough, were smart enough, were special enough, until the day he wasn't. The call came on a Thursday morning in October. I was getting Jake ready for school. He was 9 then, when my phone rang. Unknown number from New York. Is this Sarah Morrison Campbell? Yes. Ma'am, this is Detective Martinez with the NYPD. We need to talk to you about your brother, Brandon Morrison. The world tilted. Is he hurt? Is he... Ma'am, your brother is alive, but he's in custody. We're going to need your family to come to New York as soon as possible. Custody. The word didn't make sense. Brandon didn't get arrested. Brandon was the golden boy, the success story, the one who did everything right. But he wasn't. The story came out in pieces over the following weeks. Securities fraud, they called it. Ponzi scheme. Brandon had been running an investment company that promised incredible returns to wealthy clients. For years, he'd been using new investors' money to pay earlier investors, creating the illusion of success while skimming millions for himself. It had all been fake. The success, the wealth, the generosity, all of it built on stolen money and elaborate lies. The investigation revealed that Brandon had defrauded clients out of nearly $40 million. $40 million. The number was so large it seemed fictional, like something from a movie rather than real life. But it was real. Real enough that the FBI seized his apartment, his cars, his bank accounts. Real enough that his victims, retirees who'd trusted him with their life savings, families who'd invested their children's college funds, lost everything. And somehow, impossibly, our family got dragged down with him. The check he'd sent for Dad's boat? Stolen money. The kitchen renovation? Stolen money. The mortgage payments that had kept our house? Stolen money. The authorities froze everything. Every gift, every generous gesture, every act of brotherly love had to be investigated, documented, potentially returned to his victims. We had to prove that we hadn't known, hadn't been complicit, hadn't benefited knowingly from his crimes. But proving innocence doesn't protect you from the consequences. The story made national news. Small-town golden boy turns con man. Our quiet life in Maine became a fishbowl. Reporters camped outside our house. Neighbors whispered and stared. Jake, only 9 years old, had to deal with classmates asking if his uncle was a criminal. The legal bills were crushing. Even though we weren't charged with anything, we had to hire lawyers to protect ourselves, to navigate the asset forfeiture proceedings, to prove our innocence again and again. Tom's garage started losing customers. Who wants their car fixed by the family of a con man? And through it all, Brandon maintained his innocence. From his jail cell, through his lawyers, in letters to our parents, he claimed it had all been a misunderstanding, a complicated business deal gone wrong, persecution by overzealous prosecutors who didn't understand high finance. Our parents believed him, or wanted to believe him, or couldn't bear not to believe him. He's our son, Mom would say. He made mistakes, but he's not a criminal. Not really. Dad sold his boat to help pay Brandon's legal fees. Mom took out a second mortgage on their house. They depleted their retirement savings, their emergency fund, everything they'd worked their whole lives to build. I begged them to stop. He did this, I told them. He stole that money. He destroyed those people's lives. You don't understand, Mom replied. It's complicated. Business is complicated. But it wasn't complicated. It was simple. Brandon had stolen millions of dollars and ruined dozens of lives, including ours. The trial lasted 3 months. I sat in that courtroom every day, watching my brother, still handsome, still charming, still convinced he could talk his way out of anything, face his victims. An elderly couple who'd lost their retirement savings and now worked at a grocery store to pay rent. A single mother who'd invested her late husband's life insurance money and now couldn't afford her daughter's medical treatments. A young family whose college funds were gone, whose dreams were destroyed. Brandon's lawyer painted him as a brilliant businessman who'd gotten in over his head, who'd made mistakes but hadn't intended to hurt anyone. Brandon himself took the stand and gave what I'm sure he thought was a compelling performance. Contrite, but not broken. Sorry, but not guilty. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all counts. 25 years in federal prison. After the sentencing, I found our parents in the courthouse hallway, holding each other and crying. It's not fair, Mom sobbed. 25 years. He's not a monster. He's our son. And that's when I realized they would never understand. To them, Brandon would always be the golden boy who'd somehow been wronged by the world. They would never accept that their perfect son had chosen to destroy so many lives for his own greed and ego. I drove back to Maine alone. Tom had stayed home with Jake, trying to maintain some normalcy in our upended life. The 5-hour drive gave me time to think, to process what had just happened to our family. When I got home, Jake was waiting up for me, even though it was past his bedtime. How's Uncle Brandon, Mom? I sat down next to him on the couch, trying to figure out how to explain to a 9-year-old that his hero uncle was going to prison for a very long time. Uncle Brandon made some very bad choices, sweetheart. He hurt a lot of people, and now he has to face the consequences. Is he coming home? Not for a long time, Jake. Not for a very long time. That was 3 years ago. Brandon is in a federal prison in upstate New York, serving his sentence. He writes letters sometimes to our parents, never to me. I've seen a few of them. He still maintains his innocence, still claims he was railroaded by prosecutors and an unfair system, still the golden boy in his own mind, just temporarily inconvenienced by a world that doesn't appreciate his brilliance. Our parents visit him twice a year. They've moved into a small apartment, had to sell the house to pay legal bills and try to help some of Brandon's victims. Dad's health has deteriorated. The stress gave him a heart attack last year. Mom has aged a decade in 3 years. They still believe he's innocent, still think he's the victim in all this. And now, 3 years later, my son brings home a trophy, and my mother's first instinct is to compare him to Brandon. The next morning, I found Jake in the kitchen, polishing his trophy with a dish towel. It's really shiny, isn't it, Mom? It is, sweetheart. Tommy's mom said she's going to put his certificates in frames. Should we frame mine? I looked at my son, truly looked at him. He wasn't Brandon. He was Jake. My Jake. Quiet where Brandon had been loud, thoughtful where Brandon had been impulsive, kind in a way that didn't need an audience. You know what? Let's do something even better. Let's put it on your desk in your room where you can see it every day and remember how proud I am of you. Really? You're proud of me? So proud, Jake. Not because of the trophy, but because of who you are. Because you're kind of kids at school who don't have many friends. Right, because you help your dad in the garage without being asked. Because you read to Mrs. Henderson's dog when she's in the hospital. He looked confused. Those things aren't special, Mom. Everyone should do those things. Exactly, I said, and pulled him into a hug. That's what makes you special. Not because you're better than other people, but because you make other people's lives better. Over the next few weeks, I watched Jake with new eyes. Yes, he was smart, probably brilliant, if I'm being honest. His teachers raved about his potential, his creativity, his natural leadership abilities. But more than that, he was genuinely good. Not performatively good, not good because people were watching, but good because that's who he was at his core. One afternoon, I found him in his room, not admiring his trophy, but working on a drawing. It was a picture of our family, me, Tom, Jake, and surprisingly, a small figure in the background that I realized was supposed to be Brandon. Why did you put Uncle Brandon in the picture, honey? Jake looked up from his colored pencils. Because he's still family, even if he made mistakes. You taught me that families stick together, even when it's hard. And that's when I knew Jake would be okay, because he understood something that Brandon never had. That being special isn't about being better than everyone else. It's about lifting other people up, about taking responsibility for your actions, about being the kind of person who makes the world a little bit better just by being in it. The trophy is still on Jake's desk, but now when I look at it, I don't see Brandon's shadow. I see Jake's light, different from Brandon's, quieter but somehow stronger. Last week, Jake came home and announced that he'd signed up to tutor younger kids in math. Why? I asked. Because I'm good at it, and they need help. Isn't that what you're supposed to do when you're good at something? Help other people? Yes, I thought. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. My mother called yesterday. She wanted to know if Jake was interested in applying to any special summer programs for gifted students. He has so much potential, she said. We don't want to waste it. He's not going to waste it, Mom, I told her. But he's going to use it his own way, in his own time. But Sarah, if he's as brilliant as Brandon was... He's not Brandon, I interrupted. He's Jake, and Jake is exactly who he's supposed to be. After I hung up, I found Jake in the backyard, teaching our neighbor's 6-year-old daughter how to throw a baseball. She kept missing, getting frustrated, but Jake was patient, encouraging, kind. That's it, Emma. You're getting better. Try again. I watched my son, my brilliant, kind, extraordinary son, and realized that the golden boy's shadow had finally lifted. Jake wasn't walking in Brandon's footsteps or living up to Brandon's legacy. He was creating his own path, one act of quiet kindness at a time, and that path was going to lead somewhere completely different. Somewhere better. That trophy on his desk isn't the beginning of a cautionary tale about pride and downfall. It's just one small recognition of a good kid doing his best, being kind, learning to use his gifts to help others rather than elevate himself. Jake isn't the golden boy. He's something better. He's genuinely gold, all the way through. And unlike his uncle's fool's gold that tarnished and crumbled under scrutiny, Jake's goodness is the real thing. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your child isn't telling them they're special. It's teaching them that everyone is special, and that our job is to use whatever gifts we have to make life better for the people around us. Brandon never learned that lesson, but Jake? Jake understands it instinctively, and that makes all the difference in the world. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brandon's victims, those faces in the courtroom, the lives he destroyed with his charm and lies. Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, 73 years old, who'd trusted Brandon with her late husband's insurance money and now worked as a grocery store cashier to afford her medications. David Chen, a single father who'd invested his son's college fund and watched 20 years of savings disappear overnight. The Morrison family, No relation to us, just an unfortunate shared name who'd lost their house and had to move in with relatives. I tried to reach out to some of them after the trial, to apologize, to somehow make amends for what my brother had done. Most wouldn't speak to me. One woman, Jennifer Martinez, whose elderly parents had lost everything, actually hung up on me. "Your family knew," she'd said before the line went dead. "You all knew, and you all profited. But we hadn't known. At least I hadn't. I'd believed Brandon's success was real because I wanted to believe it. Because having a successful brother made me feel like maybe our small Maine family wasn't so ordinary after all. Maybe we were special too, by association." The guilt ate at me for months after Brandon's sentencing. Tom would find me awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Brandon, looking for signs I'd missed. "You couldn't have known," Tom would say, pulling me close. He fooled everyone. Professional investors, wealthy clients, financial regulators. You were his sister, not his business partner. But that didn't make it hurt less. It didn't erase the fact that I'd accepted his help when Tom's garage was struggling, that I'd let him pay for Jake's school supplies and winter clothes, that I'd been grateful for his generosity without ever asking where the money came from. 3 months after Brandon was sentenced, I made a decision that almost ended my marriage. I sold my grandmother's jewelry, a collection of vintage pieces she'd left me when she died, the only valuable things I owned that hadn't come from Brandon's tainted money. The sale brought in $8,000. It wasn't much, not compared to the millions Brandon had stolen, but it was something. I divided the money among 3 of his victims whose addresses I'd managed to find through public records: Mrs. Walsh, Mr. Chen, and the Morrison family. I included letters with each check explaining who I was, expressing my sorrow for what my brother had done, and acknowledging that the money couldn't undo their losses, but represented my attempt to take some responsibility for my family's role in their pain. Tom was furious when he found out. "That jewelry was yours, Sarah. Your grandmother wanted you to have it. You don't owe these people anything." "I owe them everything," I shot back. "My brother destroyed their lives. Your brother, not you. It doesn't matter. Someone in our family needed to do something, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be my parents." Tom and I didn't speak for 2 days after that fight, but on the 3rd day, he came home with a check of his own, $2,000 from his savings account. "If we're doing this," he said quietly, "we're doing it together." Only one victim responded to my letters. Mrs. Walsh sent a brief note. "Thank you for acknowledging what happened to us. Your brother took more than money. He took our faith in people. Your letter gives me hope that there are still good people in your family." I cried for an hour after reading it. Meanwhile, Jake was struggling more than I'd realized. His grades had slipped from A's to B's and C's. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called to express concern about his mood and behavior in class. "He seems distant," she explained during our conference. "He used to participate actively, but now he just sits quietly in the back. When other children talk about their families, he doesn't contribute. At home, Jake had started having nightmares. He'd wake up crying about bad men coming to take our house away, about policemen arresting Tom, about having to go live with strangers because our family was criminals too." I realized we needed help. Professional help. Dr. Amanda Foster was a child psychologist who specialized in trauma and family crisis. Her office was warm and comfortable, filled with toys and books and soft lighting that made even adults feel safe. "Jake is experiencing secondary trauma," she explained after our first session. "He's too young to fully understand what his uncle did, but he's old enough to sense that something terrible happened to his family. Children often blame themselves for adult problems, especially when those problems disrupt their sense of security." Over the following months, Jake worked with Dr. Foster to process his feelings about Brandon, about the trial, about the changes in our family dynamics. Slowly, gradually, he began to open up about his fears. "I'm scared I'll be bad like Uncle Brandon," he confessed during one session. "What if I have the same badness inside me?" Dr. Foster helped him understand that being related to someone doesn't mean you'll make the same choices they did. That goodness and badness aren't inherited like eye color or height, but chosen through daily actions and decisions. "Your uncle had many opportunities to make different choices," she told Jake. "He chose selfishness over honesty, money over people, lies over truth, but those were his choices, not yours. You get to decide who you want to be." The therapy helped all of us. I learned to stop carrying guilt for Brandon's crimes while still acknowledging the ways our family's dysfunction had enabled his behavior. Tom learned to support Jake's healing without trying to fix everything himself. And Jake learned that he could love his uncle while hating what his uncle had done, that family loyalty didn't mean excusing inexcusable behavior. But the real test came a year later, when Brandon called. I hadn't heard his voice since the trial. He'd tried calling several times from prison, but I'd refused all his calls. Then one evening, Jake answered the house phone before I could stop him. "Hi, Uncle Brandon," I heard him say. his voice bright with the innocent joy of a 10-year-old who still loved his uncle despite everything. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the phone from Jake's hand, my heart racing. "Hello, Sarah?" Brandon's voice was different, smaller somehow, older. Prison had worn away some of his polish. "What do you want?" I asked, motioning for Jake to leave the room. "I wanted to talk to my nephew. It's been a long time." "And whose fault is that?" Silence. Then, "I've been thinking a lot about things. About what happened. About the family. Have you been thinking about your victims? About the people whose lives you destroyed?" "Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You stole $40 million from people who trusted you. You used our family as unwitting accessories to your crimes. You nearly destroyed mom and dad financially and emotionally. What exactly don't I understand?" "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I was trying to make it right, to pay everyone back." "With what money, Brandon? You weren't earning $40 million. You were stealing it from new victims to pay old ones. That's not making it right. That's making it worse." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller still. "I miss Jake. I miss you. I miss being part of the family. And despite everything, despite the lies, the theft, the destruction, I felt my heart crack a little. Because he was still my brother. The boy who taught me to ride a bike, who'd scared away bullies who picked on me, who'd called me every birthday, even when he was busy conquering Wall Street. "You'll always be my brother," I said quietly. "But you're not the person I thought you were. And I can't pretend that what you did was okay, just because we share DNA. I know, I wanted you to know that I think about it. What I did, the people I hurt, I think about it every day." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "You should think about it every day." "Will you tell Jake I love him?" "I'll tell him. But Brandon, don't call here again. Not unless you're ready to take full responsibility for what you did. Not unless you're ready to stop making excuses and start making real amends." I hung up before he could respond. Jake appeared in the doorway immediately. "Was that really Uncle Brandon? How is he? When is he coming home?" I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled Jake onto my lap, even though he was getting too big for it. "Yes, that was Uncle Brandon. He's doing okay, I think. But sweetheart, he's not coming home for a very long time." "Because of the bad things he did?" "Yes." "Do you still love him?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a moment, really thought about it. "Yes," I said finally. "I still love him, but loving someone doesn't mean accepting their bad behavior. Sometimes loving someone means holding them accountable for the wrong things they've done. Like when you make me apologize when I'm mean to Tommy next door?" Exactly like that. Except Uncle Brandon hurt a lot more people than just Tommy, so his consequences have to be much bigger. "Do you think he's sorry?" "I think he's starting to be sorry, but being sorry isn't enough. He has to prove he's changed by his actions, not just his words." That conversation became a turning point for Jake. Over the following weeks, I noticed him taking more responsibility for his own mistakes without being asked. When he accidentally broke Tom's favorite coffee mug, he immediately confessed and offered to buy a replacement with his allowance money. When he forgot to feed our neighbor's cat while they were on vacation, he not only apologized, but volunteered to pet sit for free the next time. "I don't want to be like Uncle Brandon," he explained when I praised him for his honesty. "I want to fix my mistakes instead of hiding them." 6 months after Brandon's call, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from Jennifer Martinez, the woman who'd hung up on me when I tried to apologize after the trial. "Dear Mrs. Campbell," it began, "I owe you an apology. When you called 2 years ago, I was angry and hurting, and I took that anger out on you. I've since learned that you and your husband actually returned money to some of Brandon's victims, including my parents. I wanted you to know that your gesture meant more to them than you'll ever know. It didn't fix what your brother broke, but it showed them that there were still good people in the world. My father passed away last month, but he spoke often in his final weeks about your kindness and how it helped restore his faith in humanity. Thank you for doing what your brother should have done. Thank you for showing my family that integrity can exist even in the shadow of betrayal." I sobbed when I read that letter. Not from sadness, but from relief. Relief that maybe, somehow, we'd been able to do something right in the aftermath of Brandon's wrongs. Jake found me crying in the kitchen and immediately wrapped his arms around me. "What's wrong, Mom?" I showed him the letter and explained what it meant. "So we helped them?" he asked. "A little bit. Not enough to fix everything, but a little bit." "Good," he said firmly. "That's what families should do. Help people, not hurt them." Out of the mouths of babes. The second major crisis came when Jake was 11. He'd been invited to participate in a gifted student program at the regional high school, advanced classes in math and science, college-level coursework, the kind of opportunity that could set him up for a brilliant academic future. My first instinct was terror. This was exactly how it had started with Brandon. The recognition, the special programs, the constant message that he was exceptional and destined for greatness. But Tom Wise Tom, help me see it differently. Jake isn't Brandon, he reminded me. And opportunity isn't the enemy. Brandon's problems didn't come from being smart or successful. They came from believing that being smart and successful made him better than other people, made him exempt from rules and consequences. But what if? What if we teach Jake to use his gifts responsibly? What if we raise him to understand that privilege comes with responsibility, not entitlement? So Jake joined the program. But we made some rules. First, his participation was contingent on maintaining his kindness and humility. If we ever saw him becoming arrogant or treating others as less than himself, he'd be pulled from the program immediately. Second, he had to use his advanced education to help others. He started tutoring struggling students at his regular school, explaining complex concepts in simple terms, patient with kids who learned differently than he did. Third, we talked openly about Brandon's story, about how talent and intelligence without character led to destruction. Jake knew his uncle's history in age-appropriate detail, understood the importance of making ethical choices, even when unethical ones might seem easier or more profitable. The program was good for Jake. He thrived academically, made friends with other gifted students, discovered passions for physics and creative writing that lit him up from the inside. But more importantly, he remained grounded, kind, and aware of his responsibilities to others. When his teacher suggested he apply for a prestigious summer program at MIT, Jake's first question wasn't about the opportunity for himself, but about whether he'd be able to continue tutoring his regular students. "I can't just abandon them," he said. "They're counting on me." That's when I knew we'd succeeded. Jake was brilliant, yes, but his brilliance was tempered by compassion and guided by integrity. He understood that his gifts were meant to be shared, not hoarded. The MIT program worked around his tutoring schedule. Jake spent mornings at the university working on advanced projects and afternoons at home helping struggling students with basic math. He loved both equally. Uncle Brandon forgot that other people matter. Jake explained to me one day, "I don't want to forget that." Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents continued to deteriorate. They visited Brandon regularly, sent him money for commissary, talked about him as if he were a victim of circumstance rather than the architect of his own downfall. When Jake turned 12, they sent him a card with a note. "We hope you'll follow in your uncle's footsteps and make the family proud." I called them immediately. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded. Sarah language. "No, Mom. Just no. You want my son to follow in Brandon's footsteps? You want him to become a criminal who destroys innocent people's lives? Brandon made mistakes. Brandon committed felonies, multiple felonies. He's serving 25 years in federal prison. Those aren't mistakes. They're crimes. He's still our son. He's still Jake's uncle. And he's still a criminal who stole $40 million. Why can't you accept that?" But they couldn't. Or wouldn't. They were so invested in the image of Brandon as their golden boy that they couldn't acknowledge the reality of who he'd become. The final break came 6 months later, when I discovered they'd been telling Jake during phone calls that Uncle Brandon was being punished for things that weren't really his fault, and that sometimes good people get blamed for other people's mistakes. I was livid. We'd worked so hard to help Jake understand the importance of accountability and consequences, and my parents were undermining all of it with their delusions about Brandon's innocence. "You will not contact my son again," I told them. "Not until you're ready to tell him the truth about what Brandon did." "You can't keep us from our grandson," Mom protested. "I can, and I will. Jake needs to learn right from wrong, not twisted justifications for inexcusable behavior. We're his grandparents." "Then act like it. Be the kind of grandparents he can look up to, not enablers who teach him that family loyalty means excusing criminal behavior." I hung up and blocked their number. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but I knew it was necessary. Jake's moral development was more important than maintaining a relationship with grandparents who were actively undermining his values. Jake noticed their absence, of course. "Why don't Grandma and Grandpa call anymore?" "Because they weren't telling you the truth about Uncle Brandon, and truth is important in our family." "What weren't they telling me?" I sat him down and explained, in terms he could understand, how his grandparents were still making excuses for Brandon's crimes, still trying to paint him as a victim rather than acknowledging his choices and their consequences. "That's wrong," Jake said firmly. "Uncle Brandon hurt people. He should take responsibility for that." Yes, he should. And anyone who loves him should want him to take responsibility, because that's the only way he can actually heal and become better. "I get it," Jake said. "It's like if I cheated on a test and you just said, 'Oh, the teacher was unfair,' instead of making me retake it honestly. That wouldn't help me learn to be honest." "Exactly. I miss them," he added quietly. "But I understand why they can't be around right now." My heart broke for him, but I was also proud. At 12 years old, Jake understood moral complexity better than his own grandparents did. Update: it's been 2 years since I wrote the original post. Jake is now 14 and thriving. He's in high school, taking advanced classes, still tutoring younger students, and volunteering at a literacy program for adults. His latest project is creating educational videos to help kids who are struggling with math and science concepts. He says he wants to make learning accessible to everyone, not just the kids who find it easy. Last month, he received another award, this time for community service. When I congratulated him, he shrugged and said, "It's not about the awards, Mom. It's about helping people." That's my boy. Brandon is still in prison. He has 18 years left on his sentence. My parents still visit him, still send money, still believe in his innocence. We haven't spoken in over a year. Tom's Garage is doing well now. We've been able to help some of Brandon's victims in small ways. Hiring Mr. Chen as a part-time bookkeeper, getting Mrs. Walsh's car repaired at cost, connecting the Morrison family with resources for financial recovery. It's not enough to undo the damage Brandon caused, but it's something. It's a way of living with integrity in the shadow of his betrayal. And Jake? Jake is becoming the man Brandon never was. Brilliant but humble, successful but generous, ambitious but ethical. He talks about becoming a teacher, or maybe a doctor, careers where he can use his intelligence to help others rather than exploit them. Sometimes I catch him looking at that old trophy on his desk, his first real academic recognition, the one that terrified me so much because it reminded me of Brandon's early promise. But now when I see it, I don't see the beginning of a cautionary tale. I see a reminder of how far we've come, how different Jake's story is from his uncle's. Jake isn't the golden boy. He's something infinitely better. He's genuinely gold all the way through. And that gold will never tarnish because it's built on character, not charisma, on service, not selfishness, on truth, not lies. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your child isn't telling them they're special, it's teaching them that everyone is special, and that our job is to use whatever gifts we have to make life better for the people around us. Brandon never learned that lesson, but Jake understands it in his bones, and that makes all the difference in the world.